Hey guys, welcome to Dave's Do It Yourself. Today we're going to talk about a really cool topic, 3D printers. I've got one right here. We're going to talk about it on Dave's Innovation Yard. Here we go. Welcome back to the show. This is going to be a really interesting program today. We're going to talk about something that's really fascinated me for quite a while. In fact, to be honest with you, probably about a year. I got into 3D printing about 7 months ago. I've learned a lot and I'm going to share a lot. So we're going to talk about a specific machine today. I've got my camera here. I've got this cool camera, which is really neat too. And I use the camera to monitor my 3D printing, which is really a good, unique blend of technologies. Videography of your 3D printer as it's projecting its product on the build plate. We're going to be talking about a specific 3D printer machine today called the Dobot MOOZ 2. There's a Dobot MOOZ 1, this is the 2, which is a newer machine. There's actually a 2 Plus, it's a Kickstarter program out there. If you're interested in this product and you're interested in the larger print volume of this specific product with a little more extra functionality that I think they've added into the machine, you can check that out as well. But we're going to talk about the Dobot MOOZ 2, M-O-O-Z 2. I've seen some reviews by a lot of printers. By the way, what we're called do-it-yourselfers, or we're called makers. Obviously, we make plastic components. It's ironic that I used to talk about plastic from a perspective of me not liking plastic, because a lot of things that I own that are plastic have broken just by the fact that the metal parts are strong. The plastic components have failed. What we have unique now is we have the ability for people that are having trouble with some of their components. We can now manufacture plastic on our own. In fact, I've got something that broke recently. I have a security camera in my home, and the mounting mechanism for it had broken. I mounted it, it broke, I knocked into it somehow, and I shattered the mount for it. What I was able to do is take the mount, put it next to my printer here, use some modeling software, which is a software we use on our computers, to make sure we get all the contours of the product, the lines, the thickness, the wide, the width, and the length of the product. We model it, and then we are able to print it. It's always good to do a model prototype first. Make sure that you've got everything correct before you blow up the full use of the full product in its full, sometimes 4, 5, 6 hours of print time to create the final version. You want to try to cut that down in the first version, which is going to be your first prototype of the product. So we're going to talk about the MOOZ 2, and I've used it a lot. In fact, you can see here the build plate, this is what this is called, is heavily used with glue and all the components needed to stick a plastic component to a build plate. This has a heated build plate, by the way, which is really good because it helps the adhesion of the plastic to the build surface, so that you get a firm grip of your print so it stays firm while it's being built layer upon layer upon layer of what's called filament to make these things grow in their height and length and width. So I'm going to talk about this and the usefulness that I've gotten out of this machine to a huge degree. Now, I've seen other videos of people that review machines, and it's interesting that some of the perspectives that you get have either positive feedbacks on machines or negative feedbacks, or a mix of both for some of the people that are more fair about the products that they're representing. So you see some of them, and I don't know what it is, but sometimes they're inaccurate, and they've been inaccurate on this machine, which I think is a fantastic machine. I don't know if the people that send them these machines, the companies that send the machines, give them a limited time to have the machine of use, to review it, and then they have maybe 2 weeks to send it back. In a period of time of 2 weeks, you can never get familiar enough about a machine to really know its strong points, how to configure it, how to get the best use of it, what kind of material you need to put on the build plate to have the best adhesion, how to load the filament so you don't get filament jams. And I'm going to talk about this on this episode of Dave's Innovation Yard. So let's get started. Let me take a little quick break while I grab some tea.
Yes, there it is, a nice cup of tea.
And we're back. My wife picked up some Dunkin' Donut coffee. Actually, this is iced coffee, mocha flavor. I'm going to pour it into my cup here. And I'm going to make sure I drink the coffee and I don't drink the glue. All right, so I won't make that mistake. Take a sip. The MOOZ 2, I bought this machine about 7 months ago. I've been printing for a very short 7 months. As everyone that starts printing, we make a lot of mistakes. No matter how many YouTube presentations you watch, there will be a series of things that you don't know, and you're watching other people build products on the machines that they own. But each machine that people own are very different in the way they load, in the way the build plate works. They're very different. So you really have to become an expert at your machine, which takes some time. To be honest, it took about 2 months before I really got the nuts and bolts of this machine down. And by the way, this machine comes pretty much fully assembled. The thing I like about this machine a lot is the build. This is solid aluminum, which is tremendous. Some people that talk about aluminum call it aluminum, and they call this filaments. It's called filament. This is the United States. I'm doing the review here from Phoenix, Arizona. This is a really nice build. It's solid. It's heavy. It's really a heavy machine. Well built, well presented. It looks space age. And from a guy that likes science fiction, you can tell from my shirt here, I like machines that are built with a future concept in mind. It looks futuristic. It looks robotic. It's really pretty cool. So the things I like about it are the simplicity of it as well is really important. I've got some other machines. This is not the only 3D print machine I've got. I have other machines that have what's called a Dobot tube, which is a long straw type of thing. And it goes about 2.5 feet, 3 feet in length to feed the filament, what's called the extruder, which is the gear mechanism that pushes the filament through its entire machined process. The Dobot tube machines have complexity because there's a length of filament which goes through a tube, so you've got to get to that tube if there's a jam, and the extruder is usually hard to get because it's enclosed in plastic. This extruder is inside. I'm not going to go through the entire mechanism of how machines work because most of you guys know how machines work. I'm here to talk about this specific machine. Everything in this machine, extruder, filament, and load detection is all in this print module. And this module, I've seen people talk about the module and the complexity of getting into the module. To be honest, the complexity of getting into a module versus getting into the entire machine with the Dobot tubes is a lot simpler here than it is on other machines. And I know that because I've got another machine that has that Dobot tube setup, which to get into that machine to unclog jams, I've got to open up the physical left side of the machine.
Can't open this up. It's worthless. Forget about it.
Then I've got to get to the gear mechanism. Then I've got to get to the extruder. Then I've got to take things apart. It's a mess where this is very simple. It's got 2 bolts up here, screws, 2 screws down the bottom, and the 2 halves separate. And then you get to the mechanism here, which I believe has 4 screws in it, to drop the extruder out so you can unjam anything that's clogging the mechanism here, the print head. It's very simple. Now, you do have to have some patience the first time you do it, like anything else. After you do it a first and second time, because in the beginning when you first get a printer, you're going to have a degree of complexity because you don't really know what you're doing. Even if you watch other YouTube videos, they're talking about other machines, maybe not this one. So the load process is going to be different on each specific machine. So let's get to it. And I'm going to take a sip here and I will get to it. Eventually I'll get to it. Stick with me. I'm supposed to look cool and drink from the cup, not the Dunkin' Donut. Loading the filament into a machine. I saw one review specifically of this machine by someone that was having frustrations because, to be honest, they didn't know what they were doing. And the interesting thing is they've been doing reviews of 3D printers for it looked like 5 or 6 years. So maybe they haven't come across this specific build of a machine because this actually does 3 things. It does 3D printing, laser engraving, and CNC wood carving. So maybe they haven't come across this specific machine. And if you were specifically working with this machine for a period of time, you would not have the complexity of loading filament. It's pretty simple and it's extremely simple, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can be somewhat frustrating until you learn what you're doing. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a couple things first. I'm going to do what the most important thing is, obviously, is to turn on the machine. It's got a really cool, like, cell phone looking LCD to control the printer. Let's talk about one of the most important things you can do first is to get your bed leveled. And this does not have an automatic leveling system. However, the new Dobot machine, the Dobot MOOZ 2 Plus, does have automatic bed leveling. So I haven't played with that machine to know the sequence of events to do that, but Typical of all 3D printers to level a print bed that does not have automatic leveling. I want to do it for you guys, and if you don't feel like seeing this part of the video, then please skip forward. But what we're going to do is level the bed here, using the LCD screen, and I'm going to level the bed. We have the first point of leveling right here. So what I'm going to do is use the standard piece of paper underneath of the printer here, and I'm going to lower it in increments until I feel a firmness to the paper. And right there I've got some pretty nice firm grip of the paper. It's not too much and it's not too little. So I've got my first point of contact on this print bed perfect. I'm going to go to the next point. It'll automatically move to the next point, the opposite corner. This has 3-point leveling, which a lot of machines do. I'm going to lower it. Again, looking for that sweet spot. And I'm a little bit too low now. You notice if I try to pull the paper, I can't really pull it. Go up a little bit. That's kind of good. That's perfect right there. I went up 2, down 1. It's perfect. Third point of contact. Some nice mobility here. Some nice firm mobility because we've got a full aluminum product here. I'm going to go down again to the third point of contact. I'm pressing my LCD screen here. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video because I'm a one-man show here on this. I'm down way too low now. And I think that's the sweet spot. Yes, it is. Nice firm, nice grip here where you're going to feel some friction. And you guys know this already. You feel some friction and you're satisfied. When I press the button the 4th time now, that's where it's going to lock into its position, acknowledge my setup of my bed leveling. There we go, the next process, and of course when you do this the first time, you don't have to do this part a second time, nor do you have to do the next point, which I'm going to do now, which is actually the 0 point. Now it's going to be at the center of the build plate, and I'm pressing it at 10mm increments. You can probably see here on the LCD screen. When you get too low, don't worry, the 10mm down will change so you won't smash the print head into, or the nozzle into the print bed. See, it slowed down already. It's no longer going down at 10mm intervals. It's going down at 1mm intervals. Then when it gets closer now, it's at 0.1 millimeters. So you get that sweet spot of the 0 point. Too low. One more up, and there's that sweet spot again. And of course you have to make your own determination, your own functionality, your own figuring this out based upon the prints that you're getting. Some people like to take that first level, that first layer, and make sure it's smashed against the build plate, smushed nice and tight. If you go down too low, you're not going to get plastic coming out of the nozzle. If you're up too high, you're going to get plastic coming out of the nozzle, but it's not going to stick to the build plate because it's too high off the plate. So get that sweet spot, which I haven't hit now because you can see is way too loose. Down one more. One more. It's a little bit tight. I'm going to come up one more, and I feel like that's perfection right there. Press the interval again. Now we've got our bed leveling complete, and we've got our 0 point set. Next thing we now need to do is load in filament, and I'm going to break away and set up. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to heat up the nozzle or the hot end by pressing this button here. I'm going to heat that up to 200 degrees C. And I'm going to break away while that heats up. Right now we're at 27 degrees. It heats up pretty quickly, but I don't want to waste your time watching this video. I'm going to come back as soon as we're heated up to 200 degrees C. Okay guys, and we're back. We are now at 170 degrees C. It's only been about 10 seconds. It's warmed up that quickly. And remember, the main purpose of me doing this machine is to tell you and show you the great prints that I am getting out of this MOOZ 2 machine as a patient user of the machine to learn how to use it to its most benefit, its most effective, and its most efficient capabilities to get some really great fine prints out of this machine. 192 degrees. Now what I do, and I think this is a wise way of doing it, I've seen other people do it this way as well. I'm going to unload filament. The way I do that is, first of all, I have the LCD screen here. What I do first is I extrude into the nozzle filament. Now I press the button here and you'll see filament drop down. You see it's dropping down now. As soon as it drops down, it'll stop at a certain increment. What I do then is I immediately pull out the filament from the top. I feel like this is the best way of unloading filament. It kind of clears the pathway so that there's no residual filament in there. Next thing I do is you grab your filament and you grab your wire cutters. I use wire cutters. These work a lot better than scissors, by the way. I grab my filament. Something important to know about filament. I don't care if you stored this 1 week or 1 month. I consider the end of this filament to be a dangerous area. And in fact, when you put this through an extruder, if you feel the filament, when you pop it out of especially a Bowden tube extruder, remember I said the Bowden tube gives you about 3 foot of loading through the tube until you actually get to the nozzle. If you feel it, you can feel the extruder gears that have hit the filament. I like to cut that away because I like my filament to be fresh and as new as possible, because I feel like if you've got filament that went through a mechanism already, it's contaminated. Make sure you cut it at an angle. You don't want to cut it straight across to have a flat portion of that filament. You want that angle there. You want to be able to nip the tip, have a needle point precision feeding it through the tube. So I got rid of this much filament because this was through a different machine, through a Bowden tube where the 3 foot, this much length of filament, unfortunately, is a waste. I'm not going to use that because there's a potential there to clog and jam inside the mechanism. Next important thing to do is to make sure that you're preheated to 200 degrees. And I am. Now this machine here does not have the filament sensor here. If it did and showed me that no filament was here, this machine, because I have another machine, another MOOZ 2, which does have that. This one doesn't, but in that machine it'll shut down the heating of the print head with the filament that's no longer in there. So this machine's a little different. I would have had, if I had my other machine, I would have to load the filament in a little bit to get through the filament detection sensor before I would be able to heat it up. But this machine, I've got it maintained at 199 degrees, which is what you want. And this is an important part that some people have missed when they're reviewing machines in general, and specifically when they reviewed this machine. This has no Bowden tube. It's very simple to load this filament. You load it in, and then you press the button here to feel that extruder gear mechanism. Extruder gears are 2 gears, for you guys that don't know this. There's 2 gears. One gear has kind of like a track on it. If you know, like trains, when they run through the train tracks, if you notice the wheel of a train it has an indentation or a groove in there to keep it on the track. One of the gears here has an indentation or a little groove in it to hold this filament in a specific location on that first gear. The second gear has teeth in it which grip the filament and move it along, keeping it in the path of that first gear, moving it with the gear with teeth through the entire mechanism. So what you want to do is you want to press this to feel it engage in that mechanism. Then with it warmed up to 200 degrees, I usually hold it straight. Remember, I did straighten it, so we're going to go straight down in a precision direct with the nozzle here. It's perfect. Then I just press the button here to extrude filament. I feel it moving. I feel it gripping. I feel it going straight down. 2 times, usually 3 times, to get enough filament through there to go through to the nozzle. And you notice down here, it's working perfectly. There was no jam, no potential for jam. Perfect. I usually press it a couple times. I was using white filament. Now I'm going to make sure that I'm using the orange filament, so I'm going to extrude it enough till I get to the orange. depending on what kind of support you use. If you use a raft or you use anything, you're going to extrude enough of the white filament so you're going to get the purity of the orange filament here. Another thing to do is to wait. Don't pull it off immediately, because then you'll get a string. It'll almost be like the Spider-Man episodes with a spider web thin piece of filament coming out. You don't want that because it's hard to get off your fingers. Okay, I've extruded that and I'm ready now to print. Remember, I've got my bed leveled, I've got my 0 point, I've got my filament loaded. Now I am ready to do my first print. Are we not ready to print? No, we're not. We're not ready to print. First of all, let me put the filaments, as my wife says, on the back of the machine. There is a support for the back of the machine here for this filament. And you can obviously get bigger rolls of filament with bigger spools, and then you'll need to either print up a different holding mechanism for the printer. I usually use a mic stand, believe it or not, since I'm into music. A mic stand with the filament on it is perfect. It's got the perfect height, it's adjustable, you can angle it. You can put multiple rolls of filament on it, so you got your next roll with the next color ready to go. But now we're not ready to print yet. You know why? You saw I had the Elmer's glue here. Now let me tell you, a lot of these printers, a lot of these people that tell you what to use to make the bed a more secure bed to hold the filament down there as it's being printed layer upon layer. Some people have used glue stick, some have used painter's tape, some have actually used hairspray. When I first got this printer, I had complexities, as everyone does, on not knowing what kind of print surface adhesion to use on the print bed. This one, I've gone through even glue stick, hairspray, I've done them all. This works the best. Now in the United States we have this, it's very easy to get. As kids we always use this glue wall. I'm not sponsored by Elmer's glue wall, but what I do is I just pour in, I know exactly how much to put on this bed here. I put like a half a cap full, and then what I do is I usually have a paintbrush, but for this purpose of doing a really quick video here, as quick as I can, I'm not going to use a paintbrush. All I'm going to do is just slab it on here. And usually too, what I do is, if the glue is rather thick, this glue is pretty new, so it's not thickened up. Glue will always dry, especially in a bottle this size, where you're not using a whole lot of glue here. What I end up doing is, usually if the glue is rather dry, I almost do like a moat. I put a little bit of water here around the edge, and then I spread the glue over the water, and it spreads more thinly because the glue is maybe thicker. This glue is pretty new, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to smooth it with my finger here, so I can be quick and precise with doing the video here. Usually I use a paintbrush because you want your first surface to be extremely smooth. But since I'm just doing a quick video here, guys, just bear with me. I'm going to smooth it down with my finger enough so it's going to be, to some degree, pretty decent. Like I said, if you use a paintbrush, you can get it perfect. And by the way, the beauty of Elmer's glue wall is, when you get that first layer of glue down perfect, I can lay down about 7 prints with the same glue base that I put down now. And the way I do that is I just dilute the dried glue with a little bit of water to make it slightly cloudy, and then it dries from its cloudiness to its clear, and I get 6 or 7 prints out of this layer of glue that I just laid down. So now what I do is to speed up the process of drying, I do go to my LCD screen, and I go to my heated bed, and I heat it up to 60 degrees. Actually, sometimes I go to 65. 60 degrees for the filament I'm using here is appropriate because I read the directions in the filament and what is recommended. So I'll heat up the bed, and I'll come back after the bed is heated up. Instead of watching paint dry or glue dry, we'll break away and we'll be back after the glue is dried. Welcome back to Dave's Do-It-Yourself, Dave's Innovation Yard, DIY, Dave's Innovation Yard. We are now ready to print, or almost ready to print. Notice the print bed still has a little bit of the white glue that has not dried yet, but the rest of it is a clear. You don't see the white glue on there anymore because it's dried. And for what we're going to be printing is this little XYZ configuration cube. And we're going to build that now. So it's going to sit right here. This glue that's still a little wet doesn't matter, but it's good to show you this because You would think that the part here, which if you touch it, which I'm not going to do, but if I touch this white part, it's a little bit tacky. If I touch here on the glue that's dried, it's not tacky at all. So you would think that your optimum stickiness of this build plate would be when the glue is at this consistency, but it's the opposite. And you would think that, and I thought of that too. I thought I should start printing when it's a little bit glossy like this, a little bit cloudy. Exactly the opposite. You do not want to print on this for a couple of reasons. One is if you lay plastic down on moist glue, you're going to have a mix of paste of glue and filament, which is not good. But nevertheless, make sure your glue is dry before you start your print process. We're ready to print. We've done a lot of things. We have zero pointed out the print bed. We've leveled the print surface, the print bed. We've taken filament that was in here and properly, I told you how to properly extrude this from the machine, remove it from the machine. I showed you the way to load filament by making sure you've got your sharp pointed cut here at an angle. I showed you that you must straighten the filament, which is extremely important to have that filament almost nail straight before you put it through the mechanism, because you do not want to go through the mechanism and have it go through straight and then start to curl and start hitting various components within inside this module. You want it to go straight, so it goes straight down into the print nozzle. And now we are finally ready to print. I'm going to engage the print. I'm going to heat it up to its 60 degree on the build plate, and I'm going to heat up the nozzle to 200 degrees. Okay, now while the hot end is heating up to 200 degrees, obviously a couple steps I've done. For all you guys knowing printing, then you know what to do. What I've done is I've taken the cube here. I went to Thingiverse. You can get a lot of prints that are already modeled in Thingiverse, and you can print them out by downloading them. But what I did here is I took this off of Thingiverse. Then I went into my slicer program, which I use Cura, and I sliced it to create the G code, which I put on the thumb drive here. You could also use this machine with an SD chip, or you can also use the Wi-Fi to send files to this particular printer. But for today's video, I'm going to load the USB thumb drive into the back of the printer, and we'll be ready to print another version of this cube. Now, if I was creating my own models and not downloading anything from Thingiverse, what you do is you download and utilize a lot of third-party products out there that give you the ability to do some CAD, computer-aided design of your models, which is very useful, obviously, because you can create your own product at that point instead of using other people's already designed models and products. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start printing. I've got my print bed heated to 60 degrees C. I've got my nozzle heated up now to 194 of its 200, which is desired. And we're going to go through, and we're going to go to my my thumb drive, and I do have a model in here called XYZ calibration cube. I'm going to press that, and I'm going to start the print going. It's going to recalibrate itself with the configuration I already put into it with the bed leveling, the center point. And it's going to start loading filament through the extruder, through the nozzle, to the print bed with the glue stick on it, which is the glue. And notice here, I'm going to lower this down, the camera here, to show you the perfection I've got going on right here on this print bed. Look at that perfect first layer. The first layer is the most critical part of any machine, and specifically the Dobot MOOZ does a really excellent job. Look at that perfection in that first layer. Now this is a brim I've got on this particular model, and you can look at the models to figure out what a brim is, what a raft is. But there's a perfection in this level which you do not want to walk away from your machine at all if you can help it. But you don't want to walk away from your machine specifically on this very important first layer. Okay, I'm now at a lower angle where you can now really see this first layer. I'm trying to angle a little bit better. And I'm going to let that print, and I'll speed it up so you can see the progression of this printing. But what I'm going to do now is show you some of the models I've created with this really spectacular Dobot MOOZ 2 machine. And don't forget there's a Dobot MOOZ 2 Plus that's available now. If you go under Kickstarter, you can participate in the development and the in-your-hands version of the new model, which actually now has a much larger build area. And also has some other features which you can check on the site and see what those other features are. Let's check out some of the other products that I've created specifically with the Dobot MOOZ 2. Now this was a product that I found on Thingiverse, and it's actually a little model which is a storage component for whatever you want to put in here. But just to show you the level of detail that I'm getting out of this really fine machine called the Dobot MOOZ 2. Notice I'm going to hold it closer to camera here. This has a combination of a 5-level combination here to get to the item to open up. But what I want to show you here is the detail on the numbers here. Look at the clarity, the crystal clear printing of these numbers, which is the most important thing. Hopefully the camera's doing this justice. And notice that the wheels spin freely. And it's a really well-defined product. It was well developed by whoever modeled this, but it actually printed quite well on this machine. And it's not a big product, so the level of detail here on a smaller print is significant. Now I did find this, there's a guy, Angus, in Australia who does some really good stuff. He also does some really good presentations for machines. He's built this configuration cube, and I will show you what it is. So let me explain this. This is really a significant, important part of this machine. This circular device here represents tolerances. The center here is the largest degree of tolerance, which you could create this pretty much on any machine. You can create a tolerance cube of 0.5 millimeters, and that's what this represents. It's loose, it spins freely. There's quite a gap in here. You can probably see, if I angle this correctly, the gap in here of 0.5 millimeters. It's a big enough gap so that a lot of printers can create this device here without much complexity and with a degree of satisfaction and completion. Next we move over to the 0.4. You can see the gap is, maybe you can see it's a little bit smaller, and it spins freely. Then we come down to the 0.3, 0.2. A lot of machines have a difficulty in creating this device with a 0.2 tolerance. You can see it's pretty tight, but yet it's very free. This is a 0.1 tolerance. This is to get this degree of mobility with a gap between the layers of 0.1 is a significant achievement. Now we go down to 0.5. And if you can, this is unbelievable that this machine actually has the ability to be able to create this device with a 0.5 gap. There's almost no tolerance here, and it's such a close precision, it works quite well. When the XYZ cube completes here, I will show you this. This is the X. Let me see if I can get this closer to camera. Look at the clarity on that X. For you guys that know printing, you can see that there's no ghost on this X. The Y, also no ghosting. Perfection here in the design of this cube, or the printing of this cube. And the Z. I'll zoom in on that as well. So I'm having a lot of success with this machine. I will show you some of the bigger prints I've done. Now I do have another machine that has a larger print bed. So the outskirts of this Jeep, which I created here, was the outside of this brownish area, this wood grain, was actually built on a different machine because I could not create this large of a print on the Dobot 2. However, this could be accomplished in the Dobot MOOZ 2 Plus. So keep that in mind. But all the other components here, all the smaller pieces, for instance, here is a jack stand for the Jeep. Hopefully you can see that. I'll zoom in again. You can see actually the perfection in this creation of this tiny part here on the Dobot MOOZ, which came out really well. You can see also Jeeps tend to have a lot of, there's a little license plate on there. It says Cool 1. And all of these components were built using different layers of distance and different filament colors as well. So you can put in the electronical components here, so it actually plays music off an SD chip, off of Wi-Fi. So I created this as a radio actually. I'm not going to plug it in because if I play any music, it'll probably get cut off from YouTube here. But this was created with the MOOZ 2. I think some of the stuff I created with the MOOZ 3, the Delta printer you saw in there. And the clarity of this is look at the amazing detail in this. This here, the way I did this grill is, I started to print this, and while I was doing the infill, I thought that the infill looked great on the Jeep. So I stopped it mid-print because I like the way the infill looks on this grill. It makes the Jeep look more of a work type of vehicle, and that's what Jeeps are. So I thought that the grill looks great here. I stopped the print halfway through on this particular print. And I use clear filament. The Dobot MOOZ 2 will enable you to use ABS filament as well as PLA. So this is clear filament, ABS filament, and I like ABS filament a lot. It's a nice product. I'm glad I can use it on the Dobot MOOZ 2 or the Dobot MOOZ 3 because the print bed will go up to 100 degrees, and the nozzle on the print will actually go up, I believe, to 250 degrees C, so it gives you the ability to do prints with ABS as well as PLA. Okay, as we're walking through the house here, I thought I'd show you a few other things I created with the Dobot MOOZ 2. This is actually a puzzle. I did not model this. I found this model out there, except I enhanced it quite a bit. So it looks a lot more 3D now than it does in the original model. But this is actually a puzzle. It's a tree. It's really a cool print. I did this in multiple colors, and it came out quite nicely. One of the other machines popular with MOOZ is the MOOZ 3. And I believe there are still some of these available on Amazon.com. But this is really cool because it takes 3 filaments, and you can either swap them out and go from creating a product of 1 color or 2 colors or 3 colors. And depending on what colors you want to blend in, you can either swap them out and change the color during a print without having to reload the filament, stop it, load, unload, and then continue on in your builds. Or you can actually do gradients, which is a combination of these filaments blended in to create a different color based upon the mixing of the colors that you've got here. And just to show you the mechanism that's inside the Dobot MOOZ 2, I mentioned the extruder. There's the actual look of an extruder. You can see the gears here I was talking about. The 2 gears, the 1 gear which has the groove in it, which you're not going to be able to see the groove here, but there's a groove here which is the size of the filament, the 1.75. The other gear has the teeth in it, which actually glides it through the Bowden tube. The MOOZ 3 actually is the Bowden tube type of printer. And the 3 tubes go in to 1 print head with 1 nozzle down below. And it gives you the ability with this Delta configuration to do some pretty good prints. I enjoy this machine a lot. I've had a lot of fun with it. And that's the Dobot MOOZ 3. One of the other things very fun to build was I took this little infinity cube here, which is a really small, you can see how small it is if I put my thumb next to it. I took this small cube, blew it up to be a much larger cube, and since I'm into technology, I was able to take an Arduino computer card, which is here, and utilize the technology and software and create the LCD lighting effect. And I actually took a 3D print of my hand and created it with a filament that's clear to hold up my Alexa. So I'm pretty proud of this print as well. So you notice that the print size of this is rather large, so I had to break it up into several sections in order to print it on a smaller MOOZ 2, but I was able to do it section by section and build this total product. And that's all I've got, except to show you the machine one more time, a machine I've enjoyed owning for 7 months, using for 7 months, and you see I have another Dobot MOOZ 2 in the other room. as well as a Dobot MOOZ 3. So I like the product a lot, that's why I own 3 of them. And I'm enjoying printing some really fine prints as you've seen today. That's all I've got. This is Dave Darren with Dave's Innovation Yard. Thanks guys for joining. Enjoy your prints and be safe and secure out there. Cheers.